Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I see that people are trickling in. My name is Sheetal Singh. I'm the Executive Director of the Early Learning Lab, and today we're going to be presenting a webinar on a tool that we are developing here at the lab called the QuickCheck. It's a tool that we use to support teaching practices in the classroom. So as people come in, I am going to introduce my organization, our wonderful speakers that we have joining us, and do some quick housekeeping before we launch into the agenda. So just for some background, the Early Learning Lab, we are a nonprofit organization based in Oakland, California. We are an innovation lab for the early childhood field, and we focus on new and better ways to support teachers, caregivers, and parents of children 0 to 8. And as I said, I'm the executive director, and we're really excited to present this webinar today to focus on a tool that we've developed called the QuickCheck. You'll hear more about it, but it's really a tool that we developed out of our work in one particular school district in San Jose, the Franklin-McKinley district, in which we are helping to support teacher professional development. So with no further ado, let me just walk through our agenda for today. So it's a pretty simple setup for our hour-long webinar. We're going to introduce our panelists to you. We're going to go into a quick overview of the QuickCheck tool. And then we're going to have a panel discussion where I'm going to ask some questions of our panelists, and then we will have Q&A where we can take your questions, and then we will close. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our speakers so that they can introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Melinda Waller, and I'm the Director of Early Learning Data Governance for the Santa Clara County Office of Education, and formerly the Director of Early Learning for Franklin-McKinley School District, where Sheetal mentioned that we had piloted and developed the QuickCheck.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sciarrino, and I am the Director of Early Childhood Practice and Innovation at the Early Learning Lab, which means I get to do a lot of fun projects, and like one of my favorites, which is the QuickCheck. So I help work on teacher PD and support uptake of teacher practice in our field.
Thank you, Chris. And Erika.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erika Mathur. I work as a manager in early learning data governance, and this is a new position for me. Up till June, I worked in Franklin-McKinley School District as a special education teacher for preschool age children, and I used the QuickCheck as a tool for my teaching practice for 3 years.
Thank you so much, Erika. So before we launch into a little introduction about the QuickCheck tool, we wanted to open with a poll. So I am going to ask a question, and then you can use the chat box, so that little bubble icon you see down at the bottom, to answer. And what we wanted to ask you was, what made the best professional learning experience that you've had in your school? I know some of you are teachers, some of you are administrators, some of you don't work in schools, but as much as you could share with us, we really want to know what has made a really successful professional learning experience for you. So I'm going to give you a minute to type in your answers in the chat box. Seeing some answers come in. They look really great and inspiring. And you know, we're doing this so we could really record what you guys are saying, because we're so interested in not only developing our tool, but also supporting professional development in our partner districts all over the country. So this information is really great. I'm going to go ahead and just read a couple that I see. We have, let's see, one-on-one reflective follow-up from training and being videotaped. We have mentoring with exceptional teachers was the most meaningful to me. Another panelist has said, or respondent has said, when the session is interactive, practical, and something I could use right away. Also when it's ongoing so that questions can be answered as they arise. Okay, well, this is great. Keep chatting in as we go into our introduction of the tool, because this information is just so valuable. Okay, so we're gonna switch gears and start talking about the QuickCheck tool that we developed here at the lab. And I'm going to turn it over pretty quickly to Chris Sciarrino, who is really the brains behind the QuickCheck. Chris has been working in professional development for many, many years. And so what we really want to emphasize is that this is a tool that grew organically out of the need that she was seeing in her work with teachers and with school administrators to help with professional development systems. And so Chris, I'm hoping that you could talk a little bit about why you saw the need for a tool like the QuickCheck, and use my current favorite term, which is the implementation gap. Help us understand what the implementation gap is and how the QuickCheck solves that problem.
Okie dokie. So can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So interestingly enough, I've been doing professional development in the field for a really long time and noticed that we keep training and retraining on the same issues. So the example I'm going to use today is social emotional, but you fill in the blank. This could be any training model or any training content that you experience. So we embarked on a training in the Franklin-McKinley School District with Melinda as the Director of Early Learning, and Erika was one of the teachers who was in our trainings. And the teachers had identified that they would like more training on dealing with challenging behaviors, because they were never going to be able to reach all the school readiness goals that we had with all the challenging behaviors that we've seen in classrooms. And I know that's probably not something new to any of you, that probably the programs where you work, you could hear the exact same kind of comments. So we hired a trainer from the Pyramid Model Consortium, one of the folks who developed the original pyramid model, so she could really help us tailor this to our district needs and our preschool and preschool within a district needs. And people loved the training. We had also designed coaching that was going to be related to it, and we had also put in professional learning communities that were also ongoing. So we felt pretty good about it being a strong model. And then we went out with the coaches and we began to visit classrooms. And we were hearing things from teachers like, well, I'm doing it, but the children aren't changing. Or I'm doing one or two things, but I don't remember all of the things that we've done in training. So I don't remember all of the things that we can do. And we noticed that it was not feeling natural, and it was not feeling individualized to kids. And it was just feeling a little bit stiff. Of course, it was year one, and that happens. And so being in the early learning lab and having a whole team of colleagues that were working on rapid cycle learning, who were working on innovative tech capacities in the field, and working on design thinking processes, I thought to myself, so how do we take that and apply it to this little small problem of practice that we have, and which really is just uptake of the practices? How do we get folks to just know what's the range of things at their disposal? And came up with what we called a QuickCheck. So in my conversations with our team back at the lab, it was like, it has to be really quick. It has to be a really quick check. So that's how the name got born, that it was a QuickCheck. So it was, how can we give this information just to the teachers, have them own their own reflection, have them be reminded of what's at their disposal to be able to use, and do that more on a weekly basis, more rapidly. So they're not waiting for a teacher practice measure to come in twice a year to see if they're improving, but they could be the evaluators of their own learning by reflecting on their own practice. Now that's something that we all believe in, but it's like, how do you make that happen? And how do you kind of embed a growth mindset into our daily work? And so that's how the QuickCheck was born. We started with 10 questions that were identified from our teacher practice measure of what people would like to work on, and started to articulate the practices in a really easy way vis-a-vis a weekly short survey where people could reflect on their focus for the week, picking one of the strategies. We had 3 areas of strategies. So under each area was about 10 practices. They would reflect on what they did last week. How competent did they feel? Were the behaviors in their classroom changing? Were there more positive behaviors? Were there more challenging behaviors? What were the challenging behaviors? What were the positive behaviors? And then they would set an intention for the next week. So this is what I did last week. Here's how it worked. Here's how I'm reflecting on my classroom. Here's what I want to do next week. I am going to give you the 4.0 version of our, 4th year doing this. We used to do handwritten reports, not handwritten, but emailed reports that we were very quickly, like a mouse in a lab, generating on a wheel. And then we are able to now generate automatic reports with actionable data. So people get a reminder about their focus for the week as soon as they fill it out. Here's what you said. Here's what you want to focus on next week. Here's what you said about last week. Here's what you want to focus on next week. And they get a report that shows them that in terms of a graph. And this is a quick snapshot of one of the portions of the report that they get back. So the survey goes out on a Thursday, which the teachers chose as a day that they wanted it. So they can reflect on the past week, and then they set an intention for the next week. They get a reminder that says, thanks for filling it out. Here's what you said, and here's what it's looking like over time. Now, the one you're looking at has several weeks, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, has all of the weeks, 12 weeks of the weeks that we did it in this last pilot. And you see the positive behaviors in the yellow, green, and the challenging behaviors in the turquoise. And so you can see that positive behaviors are kind of consistently going up, and that dip you see in the second to last week is that they didn't fill out the survey. So they're also getting what those were, what the positive behaviors were, and what those challenging behaviors were. So they're able to reflect on a weekly basis in a kind of concrete way, all on their own, without it being tied to accountability of how their classroom's looking. And that is basically what they do. And what we wanted to accomplish here was really to focus on the practice. So many things focus on the end number, focus on the end judgment, on the accountability. So many things you have an external source telling you or giving you feedback, which is greatly proven as a great strategy. We also wondered, what about if we infuse some self-study, if we really build a way for teachers to reflect on their own, to provide their own direction, to provide that feeling of, oh my gosh, I am doing it. I have self-efficacy. I am now fluid. And after 2 to 3 years of doing this, the teachers are really topping out in terms of what they're able to do and in how the pyramid is becoming a natural part of their daily language and a natural part of their daily practice.
Thank you.
That's a quick overview, but please, anybody who wants to add in, please do. The slide that you're seeing now is showing what teachers have said about the QuickCheck when we've done focus groups. My favorite one is, I'm doing it. And this teacher meant, I have changed the challenging behaviors. I have begun to change the way I'm looking at children. I am seeing improvements in my interactions with students. We are seeing more positive behaviors. I can see children's behaviors changing over time. I thought this was going to be really time consuming. And actually, it also takes less than 10 minutes. And on average, this last year, it's taking people 5 or 6 minutes to fill this out. And we actually don't want them to overthink it. We want them to do a really quick check to just become more intentional in what they're doing. So the things that you see on the right hand of this slide, easy to use, great reminder, building intentionality, planning and reflection, and building sustainability of the professional learning model are all the things that the teacher said. And you may be thinking, so what did you actually see in terms of results? And besides these amazing kind of qualitative results, we actually also have some preliminary analyses on quantitative results, where our teachers who have been using it for 2 or more years are topping out on a 100-point scale at 95% plus proficiency. They've become teacher leaders. Our first-year teachers who are using it, we are seeing 15 to 20-point gains in the tool. So they may be starting at a 60, but they're going up to 70s and 80s and above. And of course, there's range in those average scores. And we are just seeing a difference between the teachers who are opting in, which we've offered this as full choice, and the teachers who did not opt in to wanting to do the self-reflection. So we're pretty excited about providing a tool that begins to build a structure and a mental map for that kind of growth mindset and uptake in practice.
Thanks so much, Chris, for the overview on the origin story on the QuickCheck tool and this overview of the tool. And before we jump into our panel discussion, I've got a number of questions that will go a little deeper into some of the points that you've talked about, including the use of data, all of these insights from behavioral science that we're trying to incorporate into the tool. I will also just say that while we have been using the tool with the pyramid curriculum for social emotional learning, the tool is designed to be used with any curricula. It's adaptable. But having said that, I wanted to ask Melinda and Chris, actually, you were both involved at the very beginning of concepting this tool. Can you talk about some of those core concepts from behavioral science and how they are implemented within the tool? Chris, maybe you could go first and then hand it off to Melinda there.
Okie doke. So any of these terms I use, I know are going to be familiar to all of us, but we thought about goal setting and making it easy. And of course, simplicity was one of our biggest markers for behavioral change, right? If you're going to make it too complex, we know that that is not going to be met with, yay, I'll try it. So, some of the comments that I see in the chat box are exactly the kinds of behavioral science indicators that we wanted to use. You have to be able to use this information right away. It has to be practical. It has to be ongoing. We have to see change in our children. And those were the things that we did. But we wanted to give people really bite-sized chunks of information. If you look at a whole teacher practice tool, there's usually, well, on the teacher practice tool we were using, there's 120 some action items on it. There is no way any of us can remember 120 items. So we tried to chunk it. We tried to take the information down and just do sentence fragments instead of using all of the jargon that we tend to use in our field. And we also, with Melinda's insight as Director of Early Learning, we made this a non-accountability tool. We said to the teachers, this is your information. It is not going anywhere else. We'll see it at the lab, but we have no supervisory capabilities. And it is totally confidential between you and the lab. And you may use it with coaches if you'd like to, or you may use it with your supervisor if you'd like to, but we are not going to. So that was a huge difference of what we did. on this journey. And many administrators won't do that. So I'll turn it over to you, Melinda, to kind of how you were thinking about that as an administrator.
You know, Chris, thank you. You know, I think one of the things that we thought about really early on is that everyone comes with different things that really work for them or that really help them think about how they grew and how they changed. And, you know, we had some early on conversations with staff around what would it look like in 2 years from now to look back on your practice. You know, what would that look like and feel like? And I often think that it's really easy to forget where you came from when you get to that end destination or when you've moved down the way. And we started having a conversation about what was it like for those people who journaled. And you should know I'm totally not a journaler. It's not something I do. I don't keep a journal. I'm often, you know, there were key points in my life when teachers said, oh, you have to keep a journal in Spanish. You have to keep a journal. You're going away to camp. Not really my thing, and it never really clicked for me. But I'll say even going through that experience when it was sort of a obligation or a mandate as a part of either a course structure or an experience like camp, I can say I went back and I read them and I thought, wow, that's really what I thought on the first day of camp, or wow, that's really what I thought on the first day of high school in Spanish 1. That's where I was at in that place in my life. And I think for any of you that are out there that you kind of look back on either diaries that you kept as a kid, if you look back on them now, it's such an insight to who you were in that space and time. And you have such a different perspective on it. And that was sort of the vision for where we wanted the QuickCheck to go, is we wanted teachers to sort of take a snapshot on their practice at a moment in time. And it really wasn't about anyone else. It was about themselves and really where they saw themselves. And initially that was a little bit of a, well, why do I need to write it down? I know where I'm at. I know where I'm going. But even after just a week, so if they took a snapshot of what they wanted to work on for that week and where their kids were at in that moment in time, and they looked back a week later, there was such a level of reflection around their practice that had they not written it down somewhere and not acknowledged it somewhere, would have just been forgotten in the busyness of their everyday work and professional experiences. And we started to see that happen throughout the year. And as Chris kind of gave you some of the anecdotes there that are kind of queued up right now on the slide, teachers really found themselves saying, you know, it really wasn't about what the kids needed to change. It was about what I needed to change in myself. And without sort of, and I wouldn't call it accountability, but an accountability to themselves or a reflection place for themselves, that would have been missed in the experience. And so think of the QuickCheck a lot like journaling, but for those of us who aren't journalers, it's not a diary that you have to write in or maintain or find. It's something that is, in our technology space, it's something that comes to you and you enter in your reflection, and then it comes right back at you and it gives you a space to record those. And it's really powerful for the teachers to look at. As Erika shared at the opening, that she did it for 3 years and where her practice transformed over those 3 years.
Thank you. And I just have to say there's nothing wrong with journaling. I do journal. But Erika, I think that is a great point to take over to you. And in addition to how the QuickCheck changed your teaching practice, I wanted to ask you specifically about one of our favorite practices at the lab, which is co-design. We really believe that end users should be part of the design of the tools and the processes that we build. And we really tried very intentionally to co-design the QuickCheck with the teachers. Can you talk a little bit about that co-design process and what it was like to participate in it and how it shaped the QuickCheck?
Thank you, Sheetal. Sure. So I was part of the first version of this tool. And it was an opt-in design from the get-go, which already gives me the freedom to, like, do I want to do this? Do I not? As I'm the type of teacher that likes to try new things, I thought this is a great opportunity for me to try something that we have not tried in our practice before. Over the years, the 3 years that I was a user of this tool, the content and the format have changed little by little. And it was very much driven by the feedback that our team of teachers gave to Chris in the lab. I feel that this was an extremely collaborative process between all the participants. And we were given plenty of opportunities really to give our input. And this happened mostly in conjunction with our professional learning days. We would have some time set aside for us as a group to look at the data that we got back from the tool, as well as we were given particular questions. How did this portion of the tool work out for you? What was it that you liked about it? What was it that you would like to change about it? So it was very specific guiding questions for us to reflect on the use of the tool. And so over the times, just to give you an example, In the first version of it, the question was, what did you focus on this past week? Without setting an intention. And I said to Chris that I think it would really be more meaningful for us as a team, for our practice, to actually set an intention, because just to randomly think, okay, what was I focusing on? Well, if I don't decide to focus on something first, then it's easy to get a little bit scattered with the needs of the students. So this was added to the second version of it. And I think that was a crucial point for us to really just go through that list through the drop-down menu that you saw on one of the previous screens and say, I really want to focus on just this one thing this week. And then at the end of the week, I would be given an opportunity to reflect how I implemented that and whether I'm actually seeing any changes. So to me, that was a key component of this tool.
Great. Thank you, Erika. Chris, as sort of being in the driver's seat on the design of the tool, can you talk a little bit about your experience of the co-design process?
Yeah, it was really, what I knew is that I might be able to build a survey that was great, but if it didn't speak to the teachers and to the teachers' context, then it was not going to be very helpful. And then it was just, kind of useless. So we just really believed in a bottom-up kind of a strategy and an inside-out strategy. You tell me, here's what we're trying to accomplish, is uptake in the strategies. Will this be helpful? Will it not? What question would you like it to reflect? We added several questions and we took several questions out based on what teachers said. And then each year we streamlined the technology a little bit more and we streamlined the language a little bit more until we have a pretty user-friendly tool this year that we are launching, and that the teachers have really said, hey, it's really much better. Hey, it's got all those things we wanted. Without the users, really, it doesn't really matter at all. So it really was a process of joint thinking and creating together, and of thinking intrinsically, like this is about you being able to think by yourself. And some teachers have said, this has not only changed my teaching, it's changed me. So those are really interesting, fun things.
Great, thank you. And moving on from co-design, I think one of the really interesting aspects of the tool is the use of data. And we talked a little bit about how this is not data for accountability, but Melinda, I as Director of Early Learning Data Governance, you have data in your title, right? So can you share with us some of your thoughts about data in the field broadly, and specifically how the QuickCheck uses data to improve teacher practice? Oh, and Melinda, you're muted.
It's a great question, Sheetal. When I think about data and kind of where Franklin-McKinley's gone, or where we are in the field of early learning, is early on we started this project 4.5 years ago. The conversations that we were having were that there is no data in early learning. That was sort of the general, I would say, higher ups belief around is, they're little kids, they don't have data. How are we going to be able to measure and generate accountability around change in practice? And, I always had this conversation around vertical articulation with elementary and middle and high school partners, and then really feeling like, the causes of the nation's academic ills kind of landed in early learning. If those kids had just gotten a better start, where would they be? And so there's a lot of attention to what type of data is out there in early learning. And Chris and I started this conversation about 4 years ago, and we started saying, well, there's lots of data in early learning. It's just how you look at the data and how you use that data to create change. And so, and my role now is part of overseeing the professional development block grant for California here in Santa Clara County. We have part of the contract to inform the work around an early childhood integrated data system. We've been having this conversation a lot, is what's the data that's needed and what data actually generates change. And the data that most people are used to thinking about is big data or administrative data or sweeping data. So when you think about district accountability systems, or you think about state accountability systems, or looking at state dashboards, and we think that tells the whole story. And the reality is that's not the data that's going to create change. The data that's going to create change is the local data held at the teacher level, held at the individual child level. So unless your integrated data system gets down to child level and really tells you what an individual child needs, or in the case of a teacher, tells you what that individual teacher's practice is, you're not going to get that sweeping change. And that's really where the power is in the QuickCheck is, Chris kind of brought up earlier that I said, this is not something we need for administration, or this is not something we need for accountability, because synthesizing these results isn't what creates the change. A director of curriculum instruction or a superintendent looking and saying, it looks like all teachers are having a hard time with self-regulation. Let's generate a plan to tackle self-regulation. That's not going to create the change. It's Erika as the classroom teacher saying, you know what? I am really struggling with kids being gelled together in my classroom, and I need to think about strategies and ways to get that to change. And then just kind of biting the bullet, selecting one strategy and giving it a go, and then saying, you know what, darn it, that didn't work. I need a new plan for next week. Or that really did work. I'm going to keep that practice going and I'm going to add one more. But it's that small data or that small change on a regular basis with lots of frequency that creates long-term systemic change. It's not looking at the data one time in a year on a fall dashboard or on a kindergarten readiness exam. It's all these little pieces of data, and it really doesn't synthesize well. And so as you think about kind of what type of data you want, I would say that there's still a place for administrative data to tell stories, but if you don't have the local or the small data out there, you won't get the change that you're looking for.
Thank you, Melinda. I love that because it reminds me of the use of precision medicine in the health field, right? As opposed to making sweeping recommendations about what everyone should be doing to be healthy. We're understanding that individuals are different and we need to look at individualized data. Erika, when we were talking about data, you had this term, falling in love with data. Do you think that teachers can fall in love with data? And if so, how can this tool help with that?
Oh, absolutely. When I first started using it, I wasn't quite sure what I would get out of it. And so definitely I see this as looking at my practice on a weekly basis would really allow me to self-reflect and see the value of focusing on certain strategies. Definitely I felt that I created a different relation with data. Most of the time, teachers hear the word data and they want to crawl underneath the table in any administrative type of meeting. And we got to a point where we as a group sat down and we actually enjoyed looking at the data because we continuously saw the improvement and the positive outcomes as a result of using this tool.
Great. Now, Erika, I'm going to stay with you for just a second and switch gears again. And, I think we all know that time is so precious for teachers that we can't keep piling things on their list of to-dos, right? So that was one of the things that we were worried about with the QuickCheck. Would teachers really want to do one more thing that's not required of them? Can you tell us about how you use the QuickCheck on a weekly basis? And if it was a big lift for you or not?
Sure. So the way it worked was we would get an email on Thursday afternoon to ask us to complete the QuickCheck. And some of the changes that were made over the time was that there were reminders. And one of the biggest lift, I think, for it was for it to be modified or developed for an application use that we could use from the phone as well. I wanted to highlight that was one of actually our questions. Are we going to be able to use it on a phone? Because sometimes we just can't find the time on a Thursday afternoon or especially Friday afternoon. Everyone just wants to kind of get out of the school. So to allow us the flexibility to, complete the QuickCheck on the weekend if we want to. I try to make it such for myself that I would definitely complete it before the end of the weekend. As it was mentioned before, it would take anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes. I did like the addition of a portion. This was also based on our recommendations that we had a section in it that allowed us for reflection on an individual student. And we would keep, choosing practices to help a struggling student with a social emotional skill over, let's say, a period of 8 weeks. And it would allow us to reflect on that as well as our group practices. For me, I feel that in my teaching practice, and I started teaching about 30 years ago, I found this as one of the most innovative tools in our practice. And it's a wonderful way to build sustainability around professional development. Because I feel that, as we mentioned at the beginning, the challenge is that teachers are provided with the professional development opportunities, and that it's great, we get excited about it, but then everything just gets buried under all the additional responsibilities that we have. This reminds us every week. It uses the language. For me, one of the biggest thing was that the language would stay alive. All these terms I would be seeing every week. I would actively be engaged with the content of the professional development. And also, as I was part of a community of teacher leaders, I actually had the pleasure of going around and observing teachers, and just as I was passing on the playground, I actually would hear some of the terms for PD used by the teachers. And I went to Chris and I said, Chris, this is working. Like, I'm hearing this language used on the playground by the teachers and the students. And we are talking TK. So, you know, it was just super, super exciting. And I feel that this is a very wonderful way of investment to try to make professional development sustainable and stick with the teachers for long term.
Right. Thank you so much, Erika. You know, looking to the future and thinking about what comes next, Chris, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your plans for the tool and how you hope to see this developed.
Well, you know, we've tried this in one district we've added new teachers every year. We started with like 7 teachers, and then we went up to 60 teachers. And we had people opt in. So there's a few questions that I have. I know how those results are, but can this also be used to be an addition to a coaching model where you don't have enough dollars to go around, that maybe some people only use the QuickCheck and it helps them to stay on it? And what is the profile of a teacher that would be the benefit for? So I'd like to figure that out. I'd also like to figure out, how about different content? What kinds of different content would it work for? My gut tells me it would work on anything you're trying to do uptake on, as long as we can enter that content easily into an app format. We'd like to see it become an app. So it's not an app yet. Right now, it's a Survey Monkey with a lot of technological backing that we have added to it from the lab. And what about different users besides teachers? Could it be parents? Could it be family service workers? Could it be speech therapists? We have a speech therapist who wants to use this tool really badly so that she knows what teachers are also experiencing. And so she can be fluid in the same language. So I think it has some applications that we haven't even touched yet. That could be very exciting.
Thank you, Chris. You know, Melinda, from your perspective, going from a district to now a county office of education, how would you like to see this tool developed, scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we've thought about this in a couple of different ways and spaces over the last couple of years. Chris and I have sort of brainstormed some. I really see 2 potential markets for it. You know, one is that people who are putting on training. So I always, you know, sort of would say there's a million consultants out there training on a million different things. And as Chris mentioned, this tool was generated because we were trying to find a way to have the practice stick with the teachers and have it become a regular part of their routine. So I'd like to see, or I would think that it would make a lot of sense for those people that are out there and they're doing private consulting and they're working directly with school districts to build this into their toolkit of things that they bring on the road with them. So that when they come and train on equity, or when they come and train on math skills or math concepts, that they add this to the toolkit. And so I could see them co-developing it with the use of the Early Learning Lab as something that they take as part of their product delivery. There is also a ton of great value in having the teachers on the ground co-design. And I think that would be a piece or a message that I would give to those consultants who are going out to train is, you know, pause and ask your audience, your stakeholders each time before you roll it out or as you're rolling out, what questions need to be adjusted, what are the drop downs, what needs to be adjusted. But that's probably the ideal market. Chris and I had talked a lot about, like, did it make sense for districts or systems to wholesale kind of use it in their context? The hard part is you can't change everything about your life, or in this case, your academic practice, all at one time. And so really, thinking about myself as a practitioner, or even just a growth mindset individual, I can't tackle how I raise my kids, weight management, professional work behaviors, finances, all at the same time. I really have to choose one area of focus. And that's the hard part about thinking about it from a district or a statewide lens, is you don't really want to go in and say to a district, okay, we're gonna adopt this tool, the QuickCheck, and you have 9 different initiatives that you're working on in your district, and we're going to use the QuickCheck on all of them, because then you have provider fatigue, or you have just teacher burnout around that topic. So I really think it makes a lot of sense to be strategic. I could see consultants who want to see a significant change in practice upon the teachers that they're implementing their professional development with, take this on as something, and then it becomes a really unique asset to them that most other consultants or trainers won't have a part of their package.
Excellent. So your perspective is so great as we're thinking about from the lab's point of view, how we develop the tool. And I see so many questions coming in, both to the chat box and in the Q&A box. I'm just going to take a pause to ask people, if you do have questions for the Q&A portion of our webinar, which is starting now, to please put it in that Q&A box. It just makes it a little easier for us to have everything in one place. We also received a lot of questions via email when people were registering for the webinar, so we're going to try to get through as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, we apologize. We will be sending some documentation out after the webinar, and we hope to address as many questions as we can through that documentation as well. But I'm going to start with a question that was emailed into us, because I think it's a good question for people to be thinking about, especially if they want to contact us about piloting this tool in their district. And Melinda, I'm going to ask you, since you have a good perspective, what is the infrastructure that a partner would need to be able to implement the QuickCheck tool?
Yeah, I think whether it's a district taking it on, or it's an individual school site, or a program director, they really have a clarity and vision around what it is that they want to have teachers do reflection for. And a really great understanding that you can't change everything all at once. So what is it that they want to monitor teacher practice or teacher professional development around, and then helping narrow that down. The second, as Chris mentioned earlier in the webinar, is you want to make sure that this isn't being used to judge them. It's not being aggregated for the larger needs of the school or the program, and then it's not being recorded and held on to. So right, when I think about a diary entry, you wouldn't write in your diary if you knew that your mother was going to read it. You write you're going to utilize the QuickCheck most honestly, and if you know that it's really something for you as an individual practitioner. And then I think the third thing is allowing a room for co-development. So as Chris mentioned, we're in 4.0. This is the 4th iteration that's going out. This tool is going to have to be unique and customizable by the users. And so if that means a program or a district has an initial set of implementation around a certain topic, and they have certain drop-down fields, right, different things that teachers could focus on, they need to be reflective with teachers also and say, does this make sense? Do we need to change any of these questions? Because that's really the intent of the tool, is that it engages that stakeholder, in this case, the teacher, in reflecting on their practice. And if it's not asking the right questions, then they're not going to be reflecting on the right things, and they're not going to end up utilizing the tool.
And just kind of laddering off of that, what would you say, Erika, is the minimum technology proficiency that's needed for someone to use this tool?
Well, anybody who is in the business of teaching already has all the tools that are needed. It's really minimal if you know how to type on a keyboard and how to click on drop-down menus, which is now required for most kind of tests, or somewhere along the line if you work in a classroom or in an early childhood setting, then you have all the tools that you need to be using it pretty much. The drop-down menus are self-explanatory. They build on each other. You're guided through in a very user-friendly way. So really there's absolutely no additional training that anybody would need to be able to be using this tool.
Thank you, Erika.
Mm-hmm.
And Melinda, can you touch on the sort of professional development infrastructure? Does coaching need to be part of the district for this tool to be used?
Yeah, great question. You know, Chris mentioned that we'd like to do some data collection around what's the right profile of the teacher and do you need coaching? I think if you think of it like training at the gym, you really want to know what it is that you're doing. If you go into the gym and you just lift weights and you don't know what you should be doing correctly, you're going to hurt yourself and not get a lot of impact, right? So that's the professional development arm, if you want to think of it. That's the training they're getting from the consultants, or in this case, it was pyramid model. And then the second piece is that, you know, you do want some level of expert redirection and possibly, but that could come from a coach. It could come from a program director or a principal, co-teacher. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, as we think about, you know, a coach coaching for 40 hours, but it could be beneficial for some participants. And then this is sort of that reflection. Am I getting the growth that I want? What changes do I need? So doesn't have to be, could be helpful. But as Chris mentioned, we really designed ours to be something that the teacher themselves could decide, do they want to talk about it with their coach? And I think of that kind of like those personal reflection. Is this too embarrassing? Did my practice not change enough? Am I not comfortable to talk about it with my coach yet? And getting them to a place where they can recognize some success, right? They've had some change and now they are confident, excited, and they would talk to their principal or they would talk to a coach about it. And that's really what we found, is that teachers who are using the QuickCheck tool independently found a desire to want to talk and share their experiences with someone else. And so they self-sought out a coach, or they sought out someone to share it with. So we thought it might be able to stand alone in their first iteration. And what we found was that people, even if they weren't formally on a coaching list, they then went and looked for someone to calibrate with or to talk about their experience with. And so for systems that really want to see coaching take hold in their district and they're struggling to get teachers to sign up for coaching, or they're struggling to get people to be invested in coaching, a tool like the QuickCheck would really push teachers who might not yet be signed up for coaching, without it being a volunteer or a mandate to have coaching, to actually drive themselves to want to have coaching because they're seeing a layer of success and a value and reflection.
Great. And, you know, I would just say, from the point of view of the lab, I think so often, especially in ed tech, you know, we're always looking for the silver bullet. So what is that one tool or app that's going to transform everything? And I would say, and Chris, I think you would agree with me, that we are not naive enough to say that, you know, just download this app and everything's going to be wonderful, right? And we designed the tool to be integrated within a system and understand that different users will have different needs as well, right? And you know, thinking about that, Chris, we had a question from one of our listeners about everyday teaching practices. What feedback and follow-up structure do they apply? And I'm wondering if you could answer that question.
Well, it's kind of all about everyday teaching practices. So it really is getting people focused on every day. So it's totally applicable for that. And the feedback is this, in this sense, it's self-evaluation and the report that they get that's generated on what they're saying about their classroom. Now, one might say, well, that's not hard data, and I would agree. And I would say it also gets people in the mental model and the habits, that daily habits of thinking about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it might be better for the kids in their classroom. And we all know that. I mean, I know that I've been in this field for a long time. There are still children who can perplex me on what I ought to do with them. And so it gives you just that little bit of a nudge to think about that and to focus on, you know, when there's something going wrong in my classroom, the first person I ought to look at is myself. What can I change? What can I change about my strategies? What can I change about my environment? How can I do this to better support this particular group of kiddos?
Thanks, Chris. And we're getting some questions about impact and how we measure the success of the tool. And I know you spoke at the beginning of the webinar a little bit about some of the data from our last pilot, but can you just kind of reiterate the measurement strategy for the tool and how we're looking to evaluate it?
You know, I think we have a couple levels. There's two things. We have qualitative. We also have quantitative. So we have some outside evaluators that have done focus groups on which you're seeing the results up on the screen of what people said it's helping them to do. We also then know and validate those findings with the teacher practice measure that we're using. And in this case, it's a teaching pyramid observation tool. I think it is always great practice to have something that you are grounding what you're trying to hit. Otherwise, we could be all over the map. And one of the best things about this is helping people to be less scattered and more intentional. And you can see that's what they said, and to provide helpful focus for their own context. So that's what I would say about measuring the success. So on a valid and reliable tool, having it grounded in that, you're able to see change over time to supplement what people are actually saying is happening for them. And we're also able to track suspensions and challenging behavior referrals.
Okay, and Chris, I have another one for you. Sorry, we're getting some questions about how the QuickCheck could align with different assessments, such as class or the California Early Educator Competencies, which isn't really an assessment, but you know, there are a number of things that people are already using. Can you speak a little bit about how the tool might align to those different frameworks?
I think it's just a matter of identifying within those frameworks where you want the focus to be, and cutting it down to bite-sized chunks so that people can manage them. Like things like the foundations and even the class are all very well articulated, and they're a lot to remember for a daily practice. So I would say, yes, let's try it. Let's do it. I would love to try that and see how the class in particular, which is the one I'm more familiar with, could get broken down and become livable, breathable daily thinking, and not something that people are afraid of. Oh my gosh, here comes the class reader. I better be on my game.
Let's see. We are getting a lot of questions coming in about cost of the tool. And so I will just pause right here to say that we are developing this tool, and we really appreciate the feedback that we've been getting from our pilot partners. Thank you, Melinda and Erika. One of our strategies for the next year is to continue to develop the tool and to look for more locations to partner with, which is all to say that we have not yet entered into a sales cycle with it, but we will continue to test and evaluate, and we do welcome inquiries about that. So if anyone is interested in bringing this tool to your district, as we mentioned over the course of this webinar, there's still a number of things that we're interested in seeing, including how it works with different types of curricula and different measurement frameworks. So please email us. And at our last screen of the webinar, we will be putting up some contact information for you to do that. I will also just give a shout out and a plug to, well, here you go. You can see all of our email addresses. So we will leave this slide up for you, just in case you want to contact me or Chris at the lab, or Erika or Melinda if you have further questions for them about their use of the tool. I will also say that we have applied to present about the QuickCheck at next year's South by Southwest Education Conference. And just to let you know that there is a public vote for that conference. And so if you are so inclined, we ask that you please go to the South by Southwest EDU site to vote for the QuickCheck as one of the presentations that will be shared. And I believe we're going to be putting the URL for that voting into our chat box. It's right there. It's called the panel picker. So the panel picker .southbysouthwest.com. You can see that URL. We do ask for your vote as well. And having said that, we're coming to the close, and I really did want to thank our three panelists here, Melinda and Erika. Thank you so much for joining us and for answering all of our questions. And then Chris, of course, you know, for sharing your wisdom and telling the origin story about this tool. So with that, we are going to close our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, all of you, for attending.